Okay, so in the last video, we looked at a bit of theory. Now we're going to start putting SQL window functions into practice. The excitement. So we're going to start with first value, quite a nice easy one. As far as possible with these tutorials, I want to use real-world data and real-world scenarios. If you practice on a nice clean, with a nice clean database like Northwind, it can be a bit of a shock hitting the real world and all the mess and chaos that that lies therein. So as far as possible, I'm going to work with real world data, and that's what we have here. Some data from a non-profit organization who offer free advice to the public on things like debt, welfare benefits, housing, and so on. Each piece of advice they give results in a case note. And for this challenge, for each client, we want the date of their first case note, the channel and funder of their first case note, the date of their most recent case note, and total case note. So sounds dry and boring, and you might think, why? Well, we are working towards something here. And what we're working towards is an understanding of the client journey throughout this organization. And part of that is going to be channel shift, which we're going to be covering in the next two tutorials. We want to understand the shift from a client's first channel to their most used channel, where they stay with the service and come back again. And then go into an understanding of, what the clients look like who come to us by phone and then move to email and so on. But in order to achieve this snazzy visualization, this is a Sankey diagram. We need to structure the data a bit first. So there is a purpose behind all this. There is method to the madness. It does result in something useful at the end of the day. So the table of data, we only need one table. Everything that we need is in this table for this particular query. The table that we're reading from is at case note level. So there's one row per case note. We have the client ID here so that we can calculate for each client. We have the created date of the, actually a timestamp, created date. So we have the date for our first case note, the date for our most recent case note, and we've got channel and funder thrown in here too. I didn't want to deal with table joins and so on, so I have created this table to work from for this exercise. So let's crack on and write some SQL. So how are we going to approach this? Well, we need data for each client. We need to partition by client. So the first thing we're going to need to do is select client ID. And we're working from this table. So from, call this demo.casenotes. And so we're going to need client ID. Then try to contain your excitement. We are going to use our first window function. So we're going to use first value. And what value do we need? Well, we need the date of the first case note. So we need the date. Case note created. And we don't need the first date for the entire data set. So we need to partition it into windows. If you think back to the theory, we need to partition it into windows, a window for each client. So we're going to use over and then partition by, I need a glass of water, partition by client ID to create a window for each client. And then we need to order that we need to order the rows in that window by the date field, so case note created, in ascending order. SQL will use ascending order by default, but I'm specifying ascending order here. You'll see why in a moment. We need to give that field a name, so let's call it first case note. So before we run this, I kind of want to explain what this partition looks like, because you won't see it. That will just be working in the background and you'll just see the end result when I run this. But what the partition will look like for a particular, you'll see this client popping up again and again. Client ID ending 115. This is what the partition will look like for each client. Now, This client I know has 14 case notes, so we've got their 14 case notes in a partition here. So we've partitioned it by this client, we've got the 14 case notes, and the date is ordered by date in ascending order. So you've got the first case note here in November 2020, and the most recent case note here in July 2021, and the other case notes in order. And what the first value function is doing, well, we've partitioned, we've ordered, and then the first value is going to come in here and take the first value, the value in the first row of case note created. I hope that's clear, but I'll kind of run through that again as we go through. So I'm going to run this code, and it may take a little while to get the result. I probably should have cut the data set down a bit. I've got 5 years worth of data and quite a feeble machine that I'm working from at the moment. So what we have as an end result is our client ID and the date of their first case note. But the table that we're reading from is at case note level. So the query is returning a result for each row. So what we have here with our client ending 115, same person as before, we have it's correctly pulled their first case note date in November 2020, but we get a repeat across 14 rows. So to get around this, there are various ways to get around that, but we're just going to use select distinct here because it's the quickest way, not necessarily the best. And I'm just going to shift all this over to tidy up my code. By the way, you can put all of this on one line. I just find it easier to read if I kind of write my code in a tidy way. So we've got our first value. Actually, let's just run that and let me show you that we now have 1 row per client instead of 1 row per case note. And there we have it, client ending 115, just that one row. Excuse the siren in the background. Just that 1 row with their first case note date, the date of their first case note. So we've got that so far. We need the channel and funder of the first case note. So that's dead easy. We're just going to copy this, paste it here, and instead of grabbing case note created, the first value of case note created, we're going to have channel. Case note channel, was it? I think that's what it was called. So essentially what's happening behind the scenes here, we're working with exactly the same partition, but instead of grabbing case note created, we're grabbing channel. So it's still going to be the channel of the first case note because we've ordered by this case note created date. So I won't run that yet, and I want to call this, let's just call it channel. Actually, let's call it first channel. So we're going to repeat this again for exactly the same principle to get our first funder. So instead of grabbing channel, we're going to grab funder, and we're going to call that first funder. I'm just going to quickly run this. I hope I've got those field names correct. No, unknown column, case note. Oh, case note funcer. Case note funcer. Just a typo there. So we're going to run this again. That is running now. Good, good, good. It will take a little while to get the results, but what we should have is this so far. When it finally runs, I might hit pause in a minute just to, yeah, I'm going to hit, no, I'm not. It's come through. Okay. So what we have now is client ID, first case note date, first channel, first funder. All done, nice and easy. Now we need the date of the most recent case note, and we come back to why I specified ascending here. So if we go back to, let's just copy this over. I'll do the code first. All I'm going to do is change that to descending order and call that, its most recent, logically last would imply finality, but let's not be too nerdy about this, and call this last case note. So all that's doing, if we go back to what our partition would look like, instead of partitioning in ascending order, we're going to partition in descending order. So our partition here in descending order will look like this. So exactly the same thing, exactly the same partition by client. But our first row here is now the most recent case note created date because we've sorted in descending order. So we're still picking the first value, but it's in descending order. So what we're actually grabbing is the most recent case note update date. So just check that I've got all that done. Okay, so we'll run that quickly. Why not? And in the meantime, I'll start writing the code for the last bit, which is total case notes. So there we want a count of case note ID, and we're going to partition this as well. Yeah. Forgot the opening bracket. Partition by client ID. Just putting the opening bracket. Whoa. Okay, so we've returned that, and we can see that we have the last case note there. If we find our friendly neighborhood demonstration client, the one ending in 115, we can see that we've correctly pulled their first case note date, November of 2020, their first channel, their first funder, and their most recent case note in July 2021. So we're all done except for the total case notes for each client. So we're going to do this in the same way as everything else, using just partitioning the data. We don't need to order the data here. We don't need to order the rows in that partition here because we just need a count of the case note IDs. It doesn't matter what order they're in at all. So we'll run that. And we should have completed our challenge. But stay tuned because there's a little more to go. Because I want to explain, if we only wanted the total case notes, we would not have to mess around with partitions. We wouldn't have to mess around with window functions. Essentially, this is using count as a window function, which, unless you have to, isn't a great idea. You can use group by instead. I do wish this would run a little more quickly, but I'm just going to keep talking because every time I think I'm going to pause this, I end up with the results. And that's not happening. So I'll just quickly, oh no, it finally does. Oh, I didn't name that last partition, that last field. If you don't give it a name, case notes. If you don't give it a name, it will just take the actual, SQL as the name, which is not ideal. But you can see that our demo client there, ending 115, all of that we've already gone through, and we have a count of their 14 case notes there. So our challenge is complete, but stick around because I want to demonstrate that if we just wanted the total case notes, we could use a much smarter, quicker way, and simply to terminate that query, and simply select client ID. We need the from as well in here, from case. I could have pasted that in from above. Case notes. So client ID and count of case notes ID from demo case notes, and then we just group by client ID. And if I run that, what you should get, assuming there are no errors, is a much quicker query that returns just for each client count of case notes. And there you can see the result. Whoa, someone with a lot of case notes there. So one final thing before I move on. We're going to need to put everything we've done here into a table that we can read from to later produce this visualization. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to go through it. The results of this query I'm going to put into a table that I've created here called client attributes. This is just the query that we've just built. Don't worry about understanding everything that's done here. If you've not created tables before, it's not rocket science. You just type in create table and it happens. So what we've started to build is a table that contains all of the results of that query that is now kind of saved to file, and we can start adding to it. So that's going to be the starting point for the next demo on rank functions, where we are going to find the most used channel. Okay, stay tuned.